Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are so glad you are here with us today.
Glad to be here.
We are unpacking a story today
Mm-hmm.
that is, well, it's a bit of a shapeshifter. It's a biography, sure. But if you look at the source material we have in front of us, it almost looks like the file on two completely different human beings.
Oh, it really does. I mean, it's uncanny. If you were to take the documents from the first half of this life
Yeah.
and you stack them against the documents from the second half, you would swear we were talking about two distinct people.
No question. One stack is just full of academic transcripts, tenure tracks, Brooks Brothers suits, and, high society Boston dinner parties.
Exactly. The whole 9 yards of East Coast establishment success.
And the other stack it's just robes, incense, beads, and these really heavy discussions about planes of consciousness and serving God.
Right. And the fascinating thing, and this is really why we're doing this deep dive, is that these two lives were lived by the exact same biological person. We're talking about the transformation of Dr. Richard Alpert, the buttoned-up Harvard psychologist, into Ram Dass, the counterculture icon and spiritual teacher.
And I think for a lot of people listening, that name Ram Dass rings a bell.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe they've seen that square blue book, Be Here Now, on a friend's coffee table.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just know the name as a sort of vague cultural reference to the 60s.
Right, he has this massive cultural footprint. You mentioned Be Here Now. That thing sold 2 million copies. It's wild.
2 million.
But what often gets lost in that, in the haze of the 60s is the actual trajectory. How do you get from point A to point B?
Exactly.
Because this isn't just a story about a guy who decided to change careers. This is a story about someone who completely dismantled his own identity, brick by brick.
And that is really the mission for this deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
We aren't just doing a history lesson. We're using his life as a kind of lens to look at identity itself.
Precisely. And looking at our sources, which, they range from his early academic work on anxiety.
Which is so ironic.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to that. But yeah, from that to the Harvard controversies, his pilgrimage to India, and then all the way to his later writings on stroke recovery, we're essentially looking at a case study in human reinvention.
Yeah.
We want to understand how a tenure-track professor became this bridge between Western intellect and Eastern spirituality.
And there are some really heavy themes here that I think are super relevant today. We're going to talk about success. Specifically, why getting everything you ever thought you wanted sometimes feels just awful.
The hollowness of it.
We're going to talk about service, and we are definitely going to talk about aging and the body, because his concept of fierce grace is something I think everyone, and I mean everyone, needs to hear.
It's just a profound insight into how to handle suffering.
Yeah.
But, you can't really understand the resolution without understanding the tension. So we have to start at the beginning. Before he was a guru, before the beard, before the robes, he was living what you might call the gold star life.
Let's open that file then, the file on Richard Alpert. Because this guy, he wasn't an outsider looking in. He was the ultimate insider.
Oh, completely. Born in 1931 in Boston. And to understand Richard Alpert, you really have to understand the family dynamic. His father was George Alpert.
And this wasn't just some guy.
No, not at all. This was a man of immense prominence, a super successful lawyer, a founder of Brandeis University, and he eventually became the president of the New Haven Railroad.
Wow. So we're talking about a high-achieving, wealthy, upper-middle-class Jewish family. The expectations must have been just sky high.
They were stratospheric. You can almost picture it. There was a checklist of success, and Richard was expected to tick every single box. And for the first 30 years of his life, that is exactly what he did.
I'm looking at the education timeline in the notes here, and it is relentless. It's one prestigious institution after another. He goes to the Williston Northampton School, graduates cum laude in 1948, then he's off to Tufts for his BA.
Right, and here's a little detail that really matters. His father wanted him to go to medical school.
Of course.
Of course. That was the crown jewel profession for a bright Jewish boy in Boston at that time. It was the path. But at Tufts, Alpert pivots. He switches to psychology.
Which, to be fair, is still a very respectable pivot. It's not like he dropped out to join a circus or something.
No, not at all. It was still academic. It was still serious. So he goes on to Wesleyan for his master's in 1954. And this is where the networking, the academic old boys club really kicks in. His mentor at Wesleyan is a man named David McClelland. And McClelland sees something in Alpert, this intense drive, this intellect, and he's the one who pushes him towards Stanford for his PhD.
Stanford. So he's moving from the Ivy League orbit of the East Coast all the way out to the prestigious West Coast.
And he just crushes it. He earns his PhD from Stanford in 1957. But I want to pause for a second on his PhD thesis, because looking back on it now, it is almost painfully ironic.
Oh, I saw this. The title is just, you can't make this stuff up.
Achievement anxiety.
So, just to get this straight, the man who is frantically chasing degrees and titles and his father's approval is writing his doctoral dissertation on the anxiety caused by the need to achieve.
It is the absolute classic academic trap of research is me search.
Right.
He was trying to intellectualize his own suffering. He spent years writing this dense statistical exploration of the anxiety produced by the need to win, all while he was drowning in that exact anxiety. It's like he was dissecting the bars of the cage he was living in, but he couldn't find the door.
So he gets the PhD, he ticks that box. He teaches at Stanford for a year. He starts psychoanalysis, which, let's be honest, was basically a requirement for a wealthy intellectual in the 50s.
What's part of the uniform?
And then he gets the call that changes his career trajectory, at least for a while.
The call to Harvard. His old mentor, David McClellan, moves to Cambridge to teach at Harvard, and he pulls Alpert in with him. This is 1958. Alpert lands a tenure-track position as an assistant clinical psychology professor.
And just for context, for you listening who aren't in academia, landing a tenure-track job at Harvard before you even hit 30. That is like being a first-round draft pick into the NBA.
It is the absolute summit. It's the pinnacle. And he wasn't just hiding in some basement lab. The sources say he had appointments everywhere.
Like where?
The social relations department, the psychology department, the Graduate School of Education, and on top of all that, he was working as a therapist at the University Health Service.
He was everywhere. He was specializing in human motivation and personality development. He published a book called Identification and Child Rearing. So by every single external metric available in 1958 America, Richard Alpert had won the game.
He had won. He had the prestige. He had the money. He drove a Mercedes-Benz. He flew his own airplane. He threw these lavish dinner parties. He had the respect of his peers. He had made it.
But, and there's always a but, in a story like this, what was actually going on inside his head?
Yeah.
Because if you look at his internal accounts, the picture is very, very different.
A disappointing hollowness. That is the phrase that keeps coming up in his later recollections. Despite all the accolades, despite all the gold stars, he felt empty.
There's a specific anecdote from the sources about his bar mitzvah that really stood out to me. It feels like the root of this whole feeling.
It really is. He described standing there as a 13-year-old boy, performing the ritual, reading the Hebrew, facing the congregation. It's supposed to be this huge moment of spiritual initiation, right? Becoming a man in the eyes of God.
And what did he feel?
He said it was flat, absolutely flat. He later said, and this is a quote, "There was a disappointing hollowness to the moment. There was nothing in it for my heart."
Nothing in it for my heart. Wow, that is just devastating for a kid.
And he carried that feeling, that sentiment, straight into adulthood. He identified as an atheist. He said he was inured to religion. He didn't have one whiff of God, as he put it.
So religion was just another system.
Just another social structure, another set of rules to follow. So you have this man at the absolute top of the academic mountain looking down and realizing the view doesn't make him feel anything at all.
He's structurally successful, but he's spiritually starving. He's an expert on human motivation who has no real motivation himself other than maybe the fear of being found out.
It is a volatile combination. I mean, he was prime for a shakeup. And that shakeup arrived in the form of a new colleague who walked into the Center for Research and Personality.
Enter Timothy Leary.
The famous or, infamous Timothy Leary. Now, we need to strip away the caricature for a second. We think of Leary as this, counterculture jester.
The turn-on, tune-in, dropout guy.
Exactly. But in 1959, 1960, he was a serious academic. He was a lecturer in clinical psychology at Harvard. He had a very well-regarded personality assessment model.
Right, he wasn't wearing tie-dye and flowers in his hair yet. He was wearing a suit.
Exactly. Alpert and Leary started working together. They were colleagues, they were friends. And in 1961, after Alpert came back from a visiting professorship at UC Berkeley, they decided to dive into a new, and let's say, controversial area of research.
The Harvard projects.
The Harvard Psilocybin Project. They began investigating the therapeutic and potential religious effects of hallucinogens, primarily psilocybin from mushrooms and LSD-25.
Okay, we have to pause and contextualize this for a second, because today, if you hear professors giving psychedelics to students, It sounds immediately criminal. It sounds like a massive scandal.
Right, the alarm bells go off. But in the early 1960s, this was completely legal. LSD and psilocybin were not illegal substances yet. They were viewed as these cutting-edge psychiatric tools.
So they were seen as medicine, potentially.
Yes. Sandoz Laboratories in Switzerland, the company that discovered LSD, was actually sending it out to researchers, hoping they would find a medical use for it, maybe curing alcoholism, maybe treating schizophrenia. This was seen as the frontier.
So they weren't like hiding in a basement. This was sanctioned Harvard University research, at least at first.
Correct. They founded the International Federation for Internal Freedom, or IFEF, which is a mouthful. They were looking at how these drugs affected the mind. And this all culminated in one of the most famous studies in the history of psychedelic research, the Good Friday experiment of 1962.
I love this story. It sounds like the plot of a movie. Tell us about the setup.
It was a controlled, double-blind experiment. Alpert was assisting a graduate student named Walter Pomke, and the goal was to test a very specific hypothesis. Could psilocybin reliably trigger a mystical experience in religiously inclined people?
So they aren't just testing it on random people off the street. They're specifically testing it on theology students.
Exactly. The perfect test group. They took 20 divinity students from Andover Newton Theological School. Half of them were given a dose of psilocybin. The other half were given a placebo.
And it was a good placebo, right? Not just a sugar pill.
A very clever one. They gave them nicotinic acid, which is basically a high dose of niacin. It makes your face flush and tingle and feel warm. So they wanted the placebo group to feel something so they wouldn't know immediately that they got the dud.
Smart. And the setting. This is the best part.
Marsh Chapel at Boston University on Good Friday, during the actual 3-hour Good Friday service.
Okay.
I mean, talk about set and setting.
I can't make it up.
You're taking theology students, you're putting them in a church on the holiest day of the Christian calendar, you're piping in organ music, and then you're adding a powerful psychedelic compound.
And what happened? What were the results?
The results were staggering. The experimental group, the ones who got the psilocybin, overwhelmingly reported profound mystical experiences.
Like what? What did they say?
They reported a sense of unity with the divine, a transcendence of time and space, a feeling of oneness with all things, a sense of sacredness. It was statistically off the charts. It was considered for a while the first real scientific proof that mysticism could be catalyzed by chemistry.
But Harvard is a very conservative institution.
Yeah.
The administration could not have been thrilled about theology students tripping in a chapel.
They were not thrilled, not at all. The controversy started to build. There were questions about the scientific rigor because, frankly, Leary and Alpert were participating in the drug-taking too.
Oh.
Yeah, they were breaking the objective observer rule. They weren't just scientists studying a phenomenon. They were becoming evangelists for the experience.
They were just studying the drug. They were promoting the lifestyle that came with it.
Exactly. And the rumors started flying around campus. They had a very clear agreement with the university that they would not give these drugs to undergraduate students, only graduate students. But, you know, the boundaries were getting very, very blurry.
And that leads directly to the dismissal, 1963.
A watershed moment in his life. They were both formally fired from Harvard, and the reasons are very specific in the record. Leary was dismissed for basically abandoning his post. He was skipping classes, leaving Cambridge without permission. But Alpert, he was fired for allegedly giving psilocybin to an undergraduate student.
Which was the one rule he absolutely could not break.
He broke the pact. And the significance of this cannot be overstated. This severed Richard Alpert's tie to the establishment. He was no longer Professor Alpert of Harvard. He was an outcast. He was a drug guy.
He lost the tenure. He lost the prestige. He lost that whole identity.
He essentially fell off the ladder of success that he had been so desperately climbing his entire life. It was a complete and total break.
So the safety net is gone. The academic career is over. Where do you go when Harvard kicks you out?
Well, if you have wealthy, supportive patrons, you go to Millbrook, New York.
The Hitchcock estate. This part of the story always feels so cinematic to me, like a scene out of a 60s film.
It is. In 1963, Peggy Hitchcock, who was an heir to the Mellon fortune, arranged for her brother, Billy, to rent this massive 64-room estate in Millbrook to Leary and Alpert's group.
Wow.
They set up a communal living situation there, and they renamed their organization the Castalia Foundation.
Castalia. That's a reference to Hermann Hesse, isn't it?
Yes, from the Glass Bead Game. Castalia was this sort of utopian intellectual colony in the book, dedicated to the life of the mind. And it shows you how they viewed themselves.
Right.
They didn't see themselves as, a bunch of dropout junkies. They saw themselves as an elite avant-garde group exploring the very frontiers of human consciousness.
So what were they doing at Millbrook? Was it just a nonstop party?
From the outside, maybe it looked like a party, but their stated objective was very serious. They were conducting group LSD sessions, they were practicing meditation, yoga, they were trying to map the territory of the mind, they were actively seeking a permanent route to higher consciousness.
They wanted to stay in that Good Friday state forever.
Exactly. But this is where Alpert starts to hit a wall, and I think this is a really important insight for you listening, especially today with all the talk about microdosing and biohacking and using substances for personal growth.
The problem of coming down.
Gravity. Mental gravity. They could take the drug and they would go up. They'd have these profound ego-dissolving unity experiences. They would feel one with the universe. They'd feel like they understood the secrets of the cosmos. But
The drug wears off.
the drug always wears off.
Yeah.
It's the Monday morning problem.
Yeah.
Alpert would have this incredible revelation of universal love on a Saturday afternoon, and by Tuesday morning, he was just depressed, anxious, neurotic Richard Alpert again. He realized that the chemicals provided the experience of the destination, but they didn't provide the transformation of the traveler.
That's a really great way to put it. The experience versus the transformation.
He said he felt like he was crashing the party. He could get in the door, but he wasn't allowed to stay. He was still Richard Alpert when the LSD wore off. He was still dealing with all his neuroses, his depression, his hollowness.
So the chemicals were like a sneak peek, a movie trailer, but they weren't the actual film.
Exactly. And that dissatisfaction, that feeling of, is this all there is what pushed him to look elsewhere. If chemistry couldn't sustain the high, if Western science couldn't fix him, maybe he needed to look east.
So in 1967, he leaves the estate, he leaves the U.S., and he goes to India.
The classic journey to the east.
Yeah.
But this is important. He didn't go as a devotee initially. He wasn't going to find God.
Yeah.
No, he was still a Western psychologist at heart. He was still a skeptic. He was searching for a map. He wanted to find someone who understood how the mind worked better than he did.
And he travels around for a bit. And eventually, he meets this guy named Bhagavan Das. Describe Bhagavan Das for us, because the visual contrast here is just hilarious to me.
Oh, it's incredible. Alpert is this, 36-year-old former Harvard professor, probably wearing Western clothes, carrying luggage, totally out of his element. And Bhagavan Das is this tall, young American, maybe 23, with long dreadlocks, barefoot, carrying a one-stringed instrument, just living completely in the moment.
Total hippie.
The hippie. And Bhagavan Das becomes his guide.
He leads Alpert barefoot through the country. And eventually, he leads him up into the foothills of the Himalayas to this tiny ashram to meet his guru,
Neem Karoli Baba.
known to his followers as Maharaji. And this meeting, this is the pivot point of the entire life we are discussing.
It's the axis on which the whole story turns.
I want to focus on one specific story from this first meeting because I think it perfectly defines the clash between the Western mind and the Eastern spirit, the LSD test.
It's a fascinating, almost mythological moment. So Alpert is there at the ashram. He's skeptical. He just sees this old man wrapped in a plaid blanket, sitting on a wooden tucket, surrounded by a few followers.
And Alpert has something in his pocket.
He does. He has a stash of what he called white lightning LSD. This wasn't, some blotter acid made in a bathtub. This was high-grade laboratory LSD from the Sandoz days.
The good stuff.
The very good stuff. And Alpert is curious. He wants to know what this guru, this man who is supposedly enlightened, will make of this powerful Western chemical. Does he know what it is? Will it blow his mind?
It's almost like a challenge, isn't it? Let's see if your meditation is stronger than my chemistry.
It's exactly that. He explains it to Maharajji as a medicine from the West. The guru asks for it. Now, we need to talk dosage here because this is key. A standard heavy trip, the kind that makes the walls melt, is maybe 100 to 150 micrograms.
Okay, got it. 150 is heavy dose.
Alpert hands him a vial containing 915 micrograms.
Wait, what?
915.
915.
It is a massive, massive dose. It is roughly 9 times a standard heavy dose. That is a dose that would shatter most people's reality for 12, maybe 24 hours. You wouldn't be able to speak. You wouldn't know your own name.
So Alpert hands it over, probably terrified that he's about to, kill this old man or send him into a permanent psychosis.
He's watching him like a hawk. Maharajji takes the pills, swallows them, and Alpert just waits. He waits for the eyes to dilate. He waits for the trembling. He waits for the guru to start talking to the trees.
No.
Nothing happened.
What do you mean nothing?
Zero. No psychotropic effect whatsoever. Maharaji just sat there, twinkling. He talked to people. He laughed. He ate. He didn't go crazy. He didn't hallucinate. He just looked at Alpert with this little smile.
Did Alpert think he faked it? Like maybe he palmed the pills and threw them over his shoulder?
He suspected it initially, but later on, other disciples confirmed that they saw him swallow them. The lesson that Maharaji offered him was profound. He told Alpert that it was possible to be in that state, the state that the LSD mimics permanently.
What did he say, exactly?
He said something to the effect of, you can take the medicine and it allows you to visit Christ, but you can only stay for 2 hours.
Wow.
He told Alpert that through meditation and spiritual practice, you can live in that place. You don't need the car to visit. You can build a house there. He said something like, the medicine is good, but it is not necessary for one who is already there.
That must have just completely destroyed Albert's entire worldview.
Shattered it.
He thought he possessed the ultimate power in that little pill, and this guru just shrugged it off like it was an aspirin.
It humbled him completely. It broke the last of his Western scientific arrogance. He just surrendered. He realized that this illiterate old man in a blanket knew something fundamental about the human mind that Harvard and Stanford and Timothy Leary had no clue about.
So he stays. He studies yoga, meditation, devotion, and this is when Richard Alpert dies, metaphorically speaking.
And Ram Dass is born. Maharaj gave him that name. Ram Dass means servant of God, or more specifically, servant of Ram, who is a Hindu deity. But the translation, servant of God, is the one he always used.
This marks the death of the professor and the birth of the teacher.
He spent about 6 months there just soaking it all up, and then he had to come back. He returned to the U.S. in late 1968 or early 69, but he wasn't coming back to a university. He was coming back to a counterculture that was starting to kind of burn out.
Right, the summer of love was over, the 70s were looming, Altamont was on the horizon.
Exactly. The initial beautiful optimism of the hippie movement was fading. Hard drugs were moving in. People were confused. They had blown their minds open with acid, but they didn't know how to put the pieces back together. They were lost.
And Ram Dass walks in with a manual.
He goes to the Lama Foundation in Taos, New Mexico, this countercultural commune up in the mountains, and he has this stack of papers with him that he called From Bindu to Ojas.
That title, definitely not a bestseller.
No, it sounds like a Swedish medical textbook. But the community there, they helped him, they edited it, they illustrated it, and we have to mention the design. Those famous, intricate, psychedelic line drawings, the brown paper bag style cover.
It looked like an artifact. It didn't look like a book you'd buy at a normal bookstore.
Exactly. And in 1971, they published it as Be Here Now.
And it just explodes.
It becomes the Bible of the counterculture. As we said, it sold 2 million copies. And you have to understand why it worked so well. It wasn't just another book about Hinduism. Ram Dass was a translator.
What do you mean by a translator?
Well, he was a Harvard psychologist. He understood the Western mind with all its anxieties and neuroses. He could take these ancient, esoteric Eastern concepts, karma, dharma, ego, chakras, and explain them using the language of Western psychology. He could say, here is your ego, here is your neurosis, and here's how this practice of meditation directly addresses that.
So he built a bridge. He made it safe for an intellectual to talk about God.
Precisely. Before this, if you were a Western intellectual, spirituality was seen as this fuzzy, anti-intellectual superstition. Ram Dass made it psychological. He made it accessible.
I saw in the notes that the cultural impact was just massive.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs mentioned it.
Steve Jobs credited Be Here Now as a major influence on his life and his philosophy. George Harrison wrote a song called Be Here Now. That was on his 1973 album.
I had no idea.
And the phrase itself just entered the lexicon. Before this book, Be Here Now was not a common saying. Now it's almost a cliche of mindfulness, but Ram Dass is the one who planted that flag in the cultural consciousness.
Now, usually when someone writes a book that sells 2 million copies, the next part of the story involves a yacht, a mansion in Malibu, and eventually a tax scandal.
Usually, yes. And this is where the servant of God part really comes into play. He didn't keep the money. The sources are very, very clear on this.
Really? None of it.
He set up the copyright so that all the proceeds went to the Lama Foundation and later to the Hanuman Foundation, which he started. Throughout his life, his royalties, and his teaching fees, which were substantial, I mean, estimated between $100,000 to $800,000 annually at his peak, all went to charity.
He didn't keep it. He wasn't living large.
No, he lived on a very modest stipend. He walked the walk. He wasn't building an empire for himself. He was funding service projects.
Which transitions us perfectly to the next phase of his life. If the first phase was achievement and the second was exploration, this third phase is very clearly service.
Seva, that's the Sanskrit word for selfless service. And Maharajji's core instruction to him wasn't go meditate in a cave for the rest of your life. It was love everyone, serve everyone, and remember God. The serve everyone part was key.
So it wasn't just about personal enlightenment or feeling good. It was about karma yoga, the yoga of action in the world.
Exactly. In 1974, he founded the Hanuman Foundation. And through that, he started the Prison Ashram Project.
What was the Prison Ashram Project?
It was about bringing spirituality into prisons. He corresponded with literally thousands of prisoners. He sent books. He treated them not as criminals, but as trapped souls who could use their time for profound spiritual growth. He famously said that a prison cell is a perfect monastery if you use it right.
That is such a radical shift in perspective. And then there was the Seva Foundation, which is still going strong today.
A huge one. Co-founded in 1978 with Dr. Larry Brilliant and the activist Wavy Gravy. Their main focus was on eliminating curable blindness in places like India and Nepal and other developing countries.
And this is what strikes me. This is such nuts and bolts practical work. This isn't just sending good vibes to the world. This is organizing cataract surgeries. This is public health logistics.
And that refutes the common critique that the whole New Age movement is just navel-gazing and narcissistic. Ram Dass argued that helping others is a powerful method of working on yourself.
How so?
He said if you are serving soup to a homeless person and you feel superior to them, I'm the great helper, you are the helpless one, then your ego is still in the way. Service becomes a mirror for your own stuff.
He also tackled the one topic that Western culture tries desperately to ignore: death.
The conscious dying movement. He collaborated with the famous Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
The woman who defined the 5 stages of grief.
The very one. Ram Dass began teaching these workshops on conscious aging and dying. He helped create the Living Dying Project, which was the first residential facility in the U.S. designed for people to die consciously.
What does that actually mean? To die consciously?
Well, in the West, we tend to view death as a medical failure. We hide it away in hospitals, we sedate it, we fight it until the bitter end. Ram Dass argued that death is a natural transition. It's a spiritual opportunity, a final letting go of the body and the ego.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to create a space where people could approach that moment with awareness, without fear, surrounded by love and support rather than just buzzing machines and panic.
It's a beautiful concept. And it's also a little bit of foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because for a guy who spent decades teaching about how to handle suffering and how to handle the failing of the body, the universe decided to give him a very, very personal final exam.
The stroke.
Let's go to 1997. Ram Dass is in his late 60s at this point.
He's 66. It was February 1997. And the irony here is just so deep. He had just started seriously exploring his Jewish roots again for the first time since that hollow bar mitzvah. He was feeling healthy. He was writing a book.
And then just boom.
A massive hemorrhagic stroke. It was catastrophic.
What was the physical fallout from that?
It left him paralyzed on the right side of his body. He was wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life. But the cruelest part of it, for a man like Ram Dass, was the effect it had on his speech.
Expressive aphasia.
Yes, expressive aphasia. And what this means is that his intellect was fully intact. He could understand everything you were saying. His mind was as sharp as ever. But he couldn't find the words to respond. The connection between the thought and the mouth was just broken.
For a man whose entire career, from Harvard lecturer to spiritual teacher, was based on talking, that seems almost like a cosmic joke.
It does. And initially, he really struggled. He was deeply depressed. He questioned his faith. He said he railed at his guru, at Maharajji, asking, "Why did you do this to me? I've spent my life serving, and this is my reward."
But he didn't stay in that place of self-pity. He reframed it.
This is where that concept of fierce grace comes in.
Fierce grace. Let's unpack that phrase. It sounds like a contradiction.
He argued that the stroke was a gift. It was grace, but it was wrapped in very, very rough sandpaper. It was fierce.
How on earth was it a gift?
It forced him to slow down. It forced him to stop traveling constantly. It forced him to be silent. And most importantly, it forced him to be dependent on other people.
It completely destroyed that helper identity he built.
Exactly. He couldn't be the big, strong guru helping the poor, sad student anymore. Now he needed help to go to the bathroom. He needed help to eat. He said it burned away the last remnants of his spiritual ego.
Wow.
And he had this great quote about it. He said, "The shrink was giving me lessons. Death is the biggest change we'll face, so we need to practice change."
That is a level of acceptance that is just. It's hard to comprehend. To look at your own paralysis and say, this is practice. This is a lesson.
It changed his teaching style, too. He had to learn to speak again, but it was very slow. There would be these long, long silences between words. But people who attended his talks said the silence was just as powerful as the words. He became a living example of how to exist in a broken body with a whole spirit.
He wrote a book about this experience called Still Here.
He did. And I love the addendum to that. In 2013, when he was in his 80s, he admitted that his earlier writings on old age, the ones written before the stroke, were naive.
Really? He called himself out.
Yes. He basically said, I thought I understood aging, but now that I'm actually here, now that I'm paralyzed and in constant pain, it's much, much harder than I thought. I just love that honesty. He never claimed to be a finished product. He was always still learning.
I want to touch on his personal life a bit more because for a long time, the guru image can seem sort of asexual or distant, but he opened up about his sexuality later in life.
He did. In the 1990s, he discussed being bisexual, but in true Ram Dass fashion, he didn't like the labels. He said it isn't gay or not gay, it's just awareness. He refused to be boxed in by any social categories. He saw sexuality as just another costume we wear, another part of the human play.
And then there was the surprise son. This story is just wild.
It is straight out of a movie. At age 78, Ram Dass finds out he's a father.
78.
A man named Peter Richard, who was 53 years old at the time, took a DNA test and it came back a match. And it turns out that way back when Alpert was 24 and teaching at Stanford, during that brief period he was trying to be a normal academic, he had a relationship with a history major named Karen Sawam.
And he never knew she got pregnant.
Never had a clue. So suddenly, in his late 70s, paralyzed, living on Maui, he becomes a father and a grandfather overnight.
How did he react to that? Did he deny it or push it away?
No, by all accounts, he embraced it with total joy. He didn't hide it. He welcomed Peter and his family into his life. He just saw it as another unexpected form of grace, another role to play in the drama, father.
So let's look at the final years. After the stroke, he moved to Maui, right?
Yes. After a nearly fatal illness while visiting India in 2004, he physically couldn't handle the long travel anymore. He settled in Maui, and since he couldn't go to the world came to him. He hosted retreats there right up until the end.
And did he ever patch things up with Timothy Leary? I know they had a pretty serious falling out back in the day.
They did. In 1974, Ram Dass had actually publicly denounced Leary. Leary was being very chaotic, getting arrested, becoming this media figure. And Ram Dass felt it was damaging the serious spiritual work, but they did reconcile.
When was that?
In 1983, at a Harvard reunion of all places.
You're kidding. The reunion of the fired professors.
Exactly. And they stayed connected after that. Before Leary died of cancer in 1996, they reunited. There's a wonderful documentary called Dying to Know that chronicles this.
Oh, I'll have to watch that.
It's a beautiful closing of the circle. You see these two bad boys of Harvard coming back together at the very end of their lives. One chose the path of the rebel. The other chose the path of the saint. But you could see they still loved each other.
Ram Dass passed away pretty recently, didn't he?
Yes. December 22, 2019. He was 88 years old. He died peacefully at his home in Maui.
Leaving behind just a massive legacy. The Love Serve Remember Foundation is still going. He has all these later books like Polishing the Mirror and Walking Each Other Home.
And, I would argue, a permanently changed Western consciousness. He really was a pioneer. He made yoga and meditation accessible. He made the idea of spiritual seeking acceptable for a skeptical Western intellectual. He proved you didn't have to check your brain at the door to open your heart.
So let's zoom out here at the end. We've gone from the high-achieving, anxious Richard Alpert to the psychedelic explorer, to the devout Ram Dass, to the stroke survivor. What is this so what here? Why does this story matter to someone listening today who might not be a hippie or a yogi?
I think Ram Dass represents the ultimate capacity for human reinvention. We so often feel stuck in our identities. We say, I am a lawyer, or I am a failure, or I am an anxious person, I am the responsible one. We think these things are solid, like they're carved in stone.
But Ram Dass's life shows that they're really just costumes.
Exactly. They're roles you're playing, and you can take them off. Richard Alpert took off the suit and tie, and then Ram Dass had to take off the robes of the helper when he had his stroke. but the core awareness underneath it all remained.
And that concept of walking each other home, it's such a beautiful idea.
It's one of his most famous quotes, "We are all just walking each other home." It reframes all human interaction, doesn't it? It's not a competition. It's not a transaction. It's a shared journey. We are all just souls in these bodies helping each other get back to that place of unity.
It really raises a final provocative thought for us to leave you with.
It does. I mean, think about Richard Alpert. Here was a man who needed every credential, every degree, every bit of external validation just to feel okay. And he had to become nobody. He had to lose the title, lose the job, and eventually even lose his fluent speech to finally find peace.
So the question for all of us is,
The question is, what credentials, what identities, what gold stars are you holding on to right now? And could it be that those very things that you are clinging to so tightly are the things keeping you from being truly here now?
that is something to chew on. Thank you so much for listening to this deep dive into the life of Ram Dass. We'll see you next time.
Be here now.